Here we are, the Integrating Salesforce with Microsoft Office through Add-ins webinar. Thank you everyone for joining us. This is going to be, I think, a really interesting webinar because for me personally, one of the funnest things that I like doing with computing is to integrate various platforms together. And this one in particular strikes home for me because before I started at Salesforce a while back, I was writing add-ins for Outlook that integrated with Salesforce. And, you know, things have advanced a lot, as we're going to see over the years here, where it's not as big a challenge as it used to be, and it's actually very modern and fits well with the web development that we're doing. So my name's Dave Carroll, and I am the Director of Developer Evangelism here at Salesforce. And with me, I have Richard DiZarrega, who's a software development engineer. Richard, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. My name is Richard DiZarrega. I am a software development engineer at Microsoft, and my role there is really around talking to developers about how to build and extend our productivity tools, so things like Office and Office 365. They're really excited to be here and join Salesforce in kind of this pursuit of building great software together.
Great. So now that you know who we are, I think you've got a couple of pretty qualified guys here to talk about this. I want to talk next about what we call our forward-looking statement, previously known as the safe harbor. This basically suggests that you do not make any purchasing decisions based on anything that we talk about that has not yet been released. And you can read this in detail at salesforce.com/investor. There's a lot of different ways that you can follow Salesforce developers on social. The Twitter account at Salesforce Devs. If you feel the urge to post on Twitter about this particular webinar, use the hashtag #ForceWebinar. We're also, of course, on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. One of the things that I'd like to talk about also is that this webinar will be recorded, so you'll be able to review it again later. And at the end of the webinar, we're going to be going over the Q&A. Now, inside of your Outlook, or sorry, your GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar console, you can post questions. So don't save your questions till the end. What we're going to do is collect your questions throughout the webinar, and then we'll go through them at the end and answer as many as we can. And if we don't get to all the questions, don't worry. What we'll do is post up the full Q&A as soon as we get all the questions answered on the landing page for this recording. So I'm going to give it over to Richard to talk about the agenda. So Richard?
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, so what we're going to do today is give you a little bit of background of Office add-ins. These aren't the add-ins that you're probably accustomed to. They've changed quite a bit over the years. And so I'm going to talk about the background of those and why they've changed. We'll take a look at Salesforce Office add-ins. So there's some kind of commercial off-the-shelf add-ins that you can get from Salesforce that can provide a really improved productivity experience while you're working inside of things like Outlook. And so we'll take a look at some of those that Salesforce actually offers you. But then we're going to kind of focus on the developer side. How can you maybe take the investments you've made in Salesforce and Office and bring those together to deliver your own custom Office add-ins? And so we'll look at a number of different ways that you can build those, the different tools, and also what are some of the common challenges and pitfalls that you want to be aware of as you go and try to build some of these Office add-ins. And then finally, we'll, like Dave said, we'll follow it up with some questions and make sure that everyone goes away happy with their questions answered. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about why you'd even care. As a developer, why would you even care about building an Office add-in? You have Office, you have Salesforce. What's the benefit of kind of bringing those two worlds together? Well, one of the main reasons we think about it is the opportunity around the footprint that Office has. Certainly Salesforce is, by far the most, popular cloud platform out there. However, we think that Office also has a really unique opportunity. There's 1.2 billion users of Office around the world. Think about that. I mean, that's a significant portion of the world population, and that includes, areas of the world where there may not be that many computing devices. And so if there's 1.2 billion users, and the users that use Office spend a significant part of their day. So we find that about 2 to 3 hours a day are what people spend inside of Office apps for the average information worker. If there was a way you could put your own customization in there, I mean, that's a pretty big opportunity. You can have your own things show up in 1.2 billion applications that people are using on a daily basis and using it for a significant amount of time. And so on the other side, we also have a lot of data. We offer Office as a service, and we've started to collect a lot of data. And this is actually a little bit outdated. It's about a year old, but at the time, we had about 470 petabytes of data. I would venture to say we're close to double that as it stands today. It's like once a year we come up with these new statistics around usage. But that really plays into our developer vision around Office. On one side, there's the user experience. On the other side, there's data. So the user experience would be those 1.2 billion users of Office. And what we want to do as a developer vision is make it to where you could put your own customization inside of those applications. And this really isn't anything that's all that new. Add-ins have been around basically as long as Office has been around. However, they brought about some big challenges that we'll talk about here in a moment. The other side of this is the data side, and we certainly have ways that you can connect into data. As it relates to this webinar, think of that data side as Salesforce. You have all this great data, and we want to tap into that and be able to get to that and bring it together with that experience that you can deliver customized inside of Office. So I mentioned that add-ins have gone through a bit of a rocky history. Let me kind of highlight where they've come from and what some of those challenges are. So I did this as kind of a little cartoon. We have this developer sitting on the bottom of the right-hand corner, and let's say he has a great idea. He has a great way that he could customize Office. And in this case, maybe he works with proposals every day, or the people that he develops for, they're constantly working with proposals. Well, the first thing that he's going to run into is that Office add-ins have been built on this proprietary development platform. You had to know all these really niche technologies like VBA or COM or macros, things that not many developers like to spend their time in. So that was the first challenge. So let's say that our savvy developer, he gets past that challenge and he learns some of those technologies and he builds this great add-in. So he builds this add-in called Pac-Man Proposals for Word. I have no clue what this does, but apparently it's going to revolutionize the proposal world. And so he builds this add-in, and then the next really big challenge that developers ran into was, well, how do you actually get people to find out about what you built? You kind of had to do your own marketing. So in this case, in the upper right-hand corner, you see this guy that's, hey, it would be so great if I had something to help me put proposals together. But he couldn't find one, even though this developer built this great add-in to do exactly that. The next challenge we ran into came into the IT organization. What if you had like 10,000 employees and everyone needed this add-in? You had to distribute that. You actually had to go and somehow get that installed on 100,000 machines, or however many computing devices you had in the organization. You had this huge challenge of distributing that. And then that introduced an entirely new challenge, which was, well, what happens if it's time to upgrade Office? Will the new version of Office work with the add-in, or will the add-in work with the version that I'm working inside of Office? So you had all these kind of challenges between the add-in and the version of Office. In fact, I like to call it the three-legged race that we ran with developers. You know, if you know a three-legged race, you're kind of joined in one leg, and you can only go as fast as the other person is moving forward with innovation. The next big challenge became, well, now Office is starting to run in a lot more places than it used to. You know, in the past, Office ran basically on your PC. You know, and if you were lucky, you might had it running on a Mac, but it certainly didn't run in all these other places you see it today. Now it runs in a browser. It runs almost on any device that you probably have in your pocket. And so that was a big challenge as we started to roll out kind of this bring your own device strategy around the enterprise. How are these customizations going to translate to these other form factors that Office runs in? And that kind of highlights this last one as well is, you know, nowadays people just want to like maybe open up a browser and be able to use it. So you got this guy down at the bottom who just has a Chromebook and he wants to, you know, it's a great browser, but how is he going to be able to work with these add-ins and be productive around these proposals that this developer worked with?
Yeah, this is a really great slide because it really reflects kind of the challenges historically with developing software pre-internet. You know, these were all the same kind of things that you had to worry about.
That's right. Yeah, it certainly isn't exclusive to Office add-ins. You know, the challenges like, you know, being COM-based, you couldn't remote things, or you couldn't. It was really bad with memory management. So you're right. A lot of this is very common, but it's certainly a growing pain we've had in the Office world for sure. So moving forward, how do we address this? How are we going to address this in a modern way? And so enter what we call the web add-in. So a web add-in is a new paradigm for Office add-ins, and kind of looking at it and dissecting it. First of all, we call it a web add-in because it's built on web standards. Nowadays, you don't have to pull out those VBA or macros or whatever skills you use to customize Office. You really can just use any web technology you want. And I really mean almost any web technology you could really imagine. So it's going to be based on things like HTML5, JavaScript, CSS. The benefit of that is that almost any device can render web content. And that means that anywhere Office runs, we're going to be able to run these add-ins, as we'll see here in a moment. We actually offer this thing called office.js. It seems like everyone's putting out a JavaScript library these days, but we actually have one for Office now. And you actually use JavaScript to interact between your add-in and the client that it's running in. So in this case, I'm running in Outlook, and I might want to be able to read details of the mail message that this is on, or maybe who sent the mail message. Those are things that Office.js can help expose to your add-in. The other really cool thing about this is they're centrally hosted. I actually just need to deploy these on some web server, and you would think, oh, it's Microsoft, you're going to make me put it on an IIS server or Azure. You can deploy these anywhere in the world on any web server. It could be an Apache server, Heroku, we really don't care. You just need it internet accessible. The benefit of that is now, let's say I have a new version of the add-in that I want to roll out to the world. Instead of me having to go and push an update to everyone that has that add-in, I can just go and do a new web deploy, and it automatically lights up that new experience for all the people that are using my add-in. It's that central deployment model that's going to make it so easy to turn out new versions of your add-in and push new exciting features out. There's also almost zero footprint. In a traditional add-in, you actually installed like an executable. Here, the only thing that occurs is when you say, I want to add the Salesforce add-in into Office, is just you get this little XML file. We call it a manifest file. And I'm simplifying it here, but in a sense, it says, here's where this add-in runs on the web. So you can see kind of the one bolded area in this slide. It shows a source location, and it points out to somewhere on Salesforce.com. That's the idea of how lightweight this is. We just need to know what web page to load up in this kind of framed area that we're going to reserve for you inside of the Office user experience. The other great benefit is because it's built for the web, is it's going to run anywhere that Office runs. So as an example, it might run in Outlook Web Access. It might run in Outlook in the Outlook client. It might run in Outlook Mobile or Excel Mobile. It really is going to run wherever Office runs. That's really the key around what we're trying to do with Office extensibility. And then finally, going back to one of the first challenges that our developer had on the last slide, is we're going to help you find these things. So we have a marketplace where you can go and discover great new add-ins. And a lot of these are free. You'll find that the Salesforce add-in for Outlook is free. There's lots and lots of free add-ins. And a lot of times, anytime I'm in Office these days and I'm stuck on a challenge, like, well, how do I do this? I'll go look for an add-in, and you'd be surprised, almost 100% of the time I find something. In fact, just the other day, I was doing something around business intelligence, and I needed to create just a spreadsheet full of dates, a date dimension basically. And I went out, and sure enough, there was a date dimension add-in for Excel that quickly just pumped in. I gave it the start date, end date, and how frequent I wanted records, and it generated all that for me. So we have a great way of finding these directly from within the Office experience.
Yeah, and for those Salesforce developers, hopefully you can see this is a lot like the App Exchange, and the App Exchange is like the store for Office is great for enterprises because you can find things that are useful for your business, but it's also great for the developer because now you've got reach that you couldn't possibly hope to get with your own energies and efforts. So really, really awesome way to get your add-ins out there.
So let's maybe change gears and look at some examples of add-ins and the different ways that you can change that user experience. So if we have so many users that are using that Office client, how can we kind of modify that? These are just some popular scenarios that we see, just to give you an example of things that you might start kind of thinking about. Obviously Mail CRM, I mean, that's where you'll see the Salesforce add-in for Outlook fit in, but there's lots of other popular scenarios, things like document assembly, automation, doing mail merges. Obviously you have contacts in Salesforce. You might want to merge that up with documents that you're creating inside of something like Word. There's things like data visualizations. Ad hoc reporting is a really big one. A lot of times as developers, we spend a lot of our time trying to simplify things for an end user. Well, when it comes to data and reporting, a lot of times data is there's so many joins and things are normalized so much that in order to have an end user figure that out and come up with the reports they want is almost impossible. Well, we can use this as a mechanism of getting data into maybe Excel in a nicely formatted, joined way. There's workflows, calendaring. It's really endless, but we wanted to give you a few kind of sample scenarios to think about. In terms of the types of add-ins, we really provide you right now 4 different shapes that you can kind of key off of. One is what we call a contextual mail add-in. This is something that's launched contextually from within a mail message or an appointment. You're going to see these inside of things like Outlook and Outlook Web Access, and Salesforce is a really good example of that Dave's going to actually demonstrate here in just a moment. We also have task pane add-ins. Task panes are something that sits beside the document. It helps you maybe assemble that document. It has read-write access, so it can do all kinds of different things. So you'll see these in things like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Project, and Outlook. Now, the one key here with a task pane add-in, it's not really a part of the document. It just sits beside the document. A contrast to that is what we call a content add-in. This actually sits in the document. It's a part of the document. And it has similar capability to a task pane, but it's something that can be resized inside the document. If I were to save a document with one of these add-ins and send it to someone, it follows that document. It actually goes along with it. And so you see these inside of things like Excel, PowerPoint, and Access. And then the last type is what we call an add-in command. It's a command that you can add to the Office user experience. The easiest way of describing this would be like adding a ribbon tab or a ribbon button to Office. We don't call it a ribbon button, mainly because not all of the different user experiences of Office have a ribbon. You know, as you might imagine, as I go down to something small like maybe an iPhone or an Android device or something like that, it starts to get smaller to where I can't have the full ribbon the way you see it inside of normal Office. Now, I might have all the same commands, but we're going to change that menuing experience, but that doesn't mean we don't want you to be able to put your same command. It might just look different, and so we call these actual just add-in commands versus like a ribbon command. So I'm just going to breeze through a few of these really quickly. I would encourage you to go out and look in the Office store. As long as you're on Office 2013 or newer, you have the ability of just going browsing the store directly from Office. But obviously, we're going to look at this one in more detail. This is the Salesforce add-in for Outlook that allows you to do a lot of really advanced things on a message that you're working with inside of Outlook. We have things like mapping. This is a great example. The best way I've heard of an add-in described is anytime you're going to have to leave things like Outlook or Excel or Word to go and do something else, like copy and paste and go somewhere else, it's a great candidate for an add-in. So in this case, this add-in looks for addresses while you're inside of your mail, and when it finds one, it lets you look that up directly in a map without having to leave Outlook. And so it's just a really simple mail add-in for maps. And this is another one that allows you to look at things like attachments and go and save those into an alternate place. So I can take an attachment and maybe save it into things like SharePoint or Dropbox or something like that. Here's a few task pane add-ins. This is just a really simple one that allows you to do things like find artwork and include that into your PowerPoint presentation. So it allows me to search for different art. This is a PayPal add-in that helps me assemble an invoice. So in this case, I sign into my PayPal account and I can generate an invoice for someone. It actually creates a nicely formatted invoice inside of Excel. This is a simple just dictionary add-in inside of Word. And this is an add-in as a task pane inside of Outlook. This happens to be Uber, where it can go and look at my calendar and help like set up ride reminders as I get closer to arriving in one of my destinations. In terms of content add-ins, here's an example of just a really simple data visualization. Excel has lots and lots of charts, but obviously if there was something that was missing, that's where an add-in fits really nicely. If there was some sort of chart or visualization that I couldn't get out of the box, go and grab a quick add-in. And the great thing is when I upload this into something like my OneDrive or SharePoint, it continues to work when it is in the browser. This is a poll, really interactive polling that I can do inside of PowerPoint. I just set up a poll, and as I'm doing a presentation like I am right now, you could have a live poll where people can SMS or tweet in their answers to a poll. And then this is just another example of a visualization where it has maps and data on top of maps. And then finally, the last one, then I'm going to turn it over to Dave to give us a demonstration of an actual live add-in inside of Outlook. This is an add-in command. These are unique because I think it opens up a whole new door for software developers. In this case, here are the add-in commands. They're actually buttons that are in this ribbon here. But what's unique here is you actually see a brand. It's your way of putting your brand into an application that 1.2 billion users use every day. And a lot of people spend way too much time in their Outlook inbox, and this is your way of not only improving the experience by providing new capabilities, but also getting your brand and brand awareness inside of those popular applications. So in this case, Boomerang, Evernote, and PayPal have all built really interesting types of add-ins to make the experience in Outlook better. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Dave, who's going to give you a quick demonstration of an add-in in action. So Dave, take it away.
Here we go. So now what you're seeing here is an Office 365 inbox. And you can see I've got various messages here that I can click around on. And what I want to do is go ahead and click on Sushila Sahay. And one thing you'll notice is we've got these links up here. One's Smart Cloud. This is an Office add-in built by a partner to connect to Salesforce. This other one is the Salesforce add-in that you can download and use from the store. And you can see right off the bat I have access to everyone who is involved in this email chain. If they're, I can know if they're in Salesforce because they show up within the add-in. And I can go ahead and click into that and get more details about the contact, for instance. I can also, more importantly, get related information. So I know what account she belongs to. If I'm dealing with a support case over email, I have instant access to all the cases for this individual. So this represents an add-in that really is just doing that, bringing Salesforce into Outlook so that you don't have to keep switching context a lot. But the great thing about this add-in is if I go over to my desktop client version, I've got exactly the same capabilities here. And so when I click on the Salesforce add-in, you see the exact same information that we saw in the online version. And so this allows you as a developer to create an add-in, and because we're using this kind of base common technology based on web technologies, we can bring this into any experience. So that's the Salesforce add-in. Right now, we're in the process of developing additional add-ins, so you'll be able to see more stuff coming directly from Salesforce. As a Salesforce customer, of course, these are always going to be free to you from the store. But as Richard suggests, I would take a look at the store and see what other add-ins people are going to be developing in the future.
Yeah, and actually right there on your screen, Dave, there's a little link that says Manage Add-ins over on the right, and that's one of the places you can use to go and find the add-ins that you already have set up or go and find new ones. So in this case, you can see that those are some of the add-ins that he uses, but you can certainly jump out to the store, and there's lots and lots of popular ones that are out here. So definitely check those out, and definitely check out the Salesforce one.
Yep, for sure. So yeah, that's the demo of the add-ins, the Salesforce add-in.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the developer experience. So we spent a little bit of time just giving you some background, the history, show you kind of an add-in running, but this is a developer-focused webinar, and so we want to talk about how you could build an add-in. So we have a few different ways you can do that. The first is what we call Napa. Napa is our least cost of entry approach. In fact, all you need is a browser and some sort of Microsoft account, like an Outlook.com or Live.com account, and you can basically build it completely in a browser. So this is an in-browser web editor that you get. It's a little bit more than just a text editor. It actually does things like what we call IntelliSense for JavaScript and HTML5. So it gives you a little bit better of just more than a notepad type of experience, but you can build and deploy directly from the browser add-ins using Napa. So you just go out to napacloudapp.com, and it allows you to go and do kind of your first, I would say, your first jump into the developer experience for add-ins.
Yeah, and I think the Napa solution is probably the best place to start if you're brand new to developing these add-ins.
Exactly. It's you don't have to install any sort of special tooling. Really, again, it's just a browser. I equate this a lot to if you use tools like Plunker or CodePen to just quickly mock up something, this is a great tool for you. Now, what I will tell you is this probably isn't what you're going to go and produce an app for the store completely inside of Napa. And the main reason for that is we don't expose things like the full manifest file. So if you wanted to really tweak around some of the settings of the add-in, you don't get full exposure to that. but we do allow you to share the project that you're working on, and you can export it as a a project that you might want to open into kind of a full developer tool. Speaking of full developer tools, I am the Microsoft guy speaking, so I should mention that Visual Studio does provide really the first-class experience for developing and debugging add-ins. And when I say first-class experience, we have templates for add-ins. You can simply go and say, I want to create a new project. You select the Office add-in project, and it'll go and generate a fully functioning project for you. All you have to do is press F5 or press the little debug button inside of Visual Studio, and it will automatically launch everything you need to. It'll attach a debugger. It basically does everything for you. And so I really do feel like this is what I would call the first-class development experience. That being said, I know that there's a lot of developers that groan about having to use something like Visual Studio because it tends to be a little bit of a heavyweight install. I mean, I think Visual Studio it's a multi-gig install. Well, if you want to do something a little bit more lightweight, we also have a really good story for you there as well. So one of the things that Microsoft has been investing a lot in is trying to embrace the open source developer. And so we took what we were already doing in Visual Studio with templates, and we created what we call a Yeoman generator. So if you're familiar with Yeoman, it's basically it's like a project scaffolding tool. It's run from a command line where you can go and generate different types of projects that you want, and it ultimately will generate kind of that full project scaffolding for you, kind of a skeleton project for add-ins. And so that's what we are doing with Yeoman. So Yeoman uses a lot of open source tools like Node Package Manager and Bower and Gulp to really provide almost the same type of experience you get in Visual Studio, but outside of Visual Studio, using any type of code editor, whether that's brackets or whatever you like to use. Yeoman does a really good job of that, and we're going to look at that in just a moment, how I could actually build and deploy an add-in that I'm building just using Yeoman and a simple heavyweight text editor. One of the other things that we are going to offer you as developers is something called the Office UI Fabric. This is a front-end framework so that you can get the look and feel of Office. If you're going to put your own customization inside of Office, you can really make it look any way you want. However, if you want it to look like it kind of fits in nicely with Office, we want to give you the tools to be able to achieve that Office look and feel. And so we provide this thing called the Office UI Fabric. This is very common for a technology provider to provide a framework like this. It's very similar to Twitter Bootstrap or Google's Material Design or some of the Lightning tools that, Lightning components that you guys offer at Salesforce.
Yeah, this is a lot like the Salesforce Lightning design system. And what I found interesting the first time that I started looking into Office add-ins is the aesthetic between Office, modern Office, and Salesforce is actually very similar. And so you'll find that maybe you can get away with just SLDS if you want a more Office-looking version of your add-in, then the Fabric is the way to go.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we find that some developers explicitly want to not look like Office. They want it to, like, if their brand and their applications have buttons look a certain way in their application, they want it to look the same way when it comes into Office. And so that's fine. We don't have a problem with that. This is really, our thought is as an accelerator to help you get a good looking add-in quickly. So with that said, let me jump out of slides and give you an example of building an Office add-in. I'll show you a couple different ways of doing that. The first one is here in the browser. I happen to be in Napa. I just went to napacloudapp.com, and in this case, this is that in-browser experience. I can go and say sign in, and again, all I need in order to work in Napa is some sort of Microsoft account, like a live.com or a outlook.com, whatever you might use to use something like, I don't know, Xbox Live. Same type of account works here.
So Richard, does it require any kind of MSDN subscription?
No, there's like no cost of entry here other than just having just a simple Microsoft account. So most of the people that are, I find that almost every developer tends to have like, they have a Gmail account, they have some sort of Microsoft account, they kind of have all their accounts covered from that standpoint. You have probably enough to just start working in Napa right now. So I'm here in Napa, and you can see I have a bunch of projects that I've already created. I can go create a new project, and when I do that, it's going to ask me what type of project I want to create. Is it going to be a content add-in, a task pane add-in? Do I want to create one of those mail add-ins? And from there, I can immediately start working in it. So I'm going to go back and select one that I already created. In fact, this is one that I created for the Salesforce workshop. And so if I go into this one, you can see it's basically an in-browser code editor. Now the cool thing is it's not just, you can see that it gives me nice syntax highlighting and things like that, but also if I'm actually in the code, in this case it has jQuery that it's using. If I were to do a jQuery syntax here of just, we'll just say foo, if I put a dot here, it actually gives me full IntelliSense. It looks at what's available on a jQuery object and actually shows me what I can perform on here. And so it's a little bit better than just using Notepad, but from here I have a lot of options, like being able to, I can debug it, I can run it directly from here, I can share the project, I can export it so that I can use it in a full-fledged editor. But it really gives me a nice experience. So if I wanted to play this here, you can see that it actually will use your OneDrive to store the file. So it's actually taking me out to OneDrive now. And then it'll actually launch this add-in directly here in the browser. So I'll just say start. And there you can see this is a data export tool inside of, for exporting some data that's in Salesforce into my spreadsheet so I can manipulate it the way I want. So that's how easy the experience is here in Napa. Let me show you kind of more of a heavyweight version of development. If I wanted to actually have a much more flexibility around all the different settings, I'm going to turn to the Yeoman generator. So I'm going to open up a terminal here. If you're running on a PC, you just open up like a node. As long as you have node in your path, you can pull up any sort of command prompt. And what I'm going to do is first, let's make a folder for this. So I'm going to go to my projects folder. We'll go to Office, and let's just do a make directory. We'll call this Salesforce Webinar. And we'll change directories to that. And now I'm just going to run a command, that Yeoman generator, and I'm just going to run Yo Office. That's all I'm going to type in here. It's just Yo Office. And this is going to walk me through a bit of a wizard for what I want to, what type of project do I want to create. So the first thing it's going to ask me is what's the name of my project. We'll say this is Salesforce Webinar. Do I want to use this folder or a different folder? I'm just going to select the default. The next thing you can see here, it's actually asking me what type of Office project do I want. Do I want to build a mail add-in, a task pane add-in, or a content add-in? I'm going to go with a task pane add-in. And the next thing is what technology do you want to use? And so I'll kind of zoom in on this here a little bit. You can see that we'll give you just a bare bones HTML, CSS, and JavaScript template. You can also pick from a few different Angular templates. We find that AngularJS is a really popular tool to use for building these, and so we created a few project templates that use Angular. There's one that's just kind of regular Angular, and then there's one that has what we call ADAL. It's a library for helping me authenticate to some of the Microsoft services. So there's that one. And then the other option I can do is, let's say you already have a web project and it's ready to go. You're ready to automatically deploy that and make it be an add-in. one of the key things is you do have to generate a manifest file, and that schema can be kind of complex. So we actually will allow you to use this Yeoman generator just to generate the manifest file. That's one of the options here that you can do when you create this. Let's just go with the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript version, and let's target. You can see I can do it for Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Project. Let's do Word as an example here. And then it's going to basically go off and generate this project for me. It's going to use a lot of tools behind the scenes like Node Package Manager and Gulp and Bower to help generate this. But the output of this is going to be basically exactly what I'd get with Visual Studio. And it's going to do the exact same things Visual Studio does for me, but this is very lightweight. I'm just using a terminal. I didn't have to install that 2 GB install. So this will crank away. It takes, anywhere from about, depending on the speed of your internet, anywhere from like 10 to maybe 25 seconds to finish. So it looks like it's doing the last little bit. It's installing the Bower client-side packages. And there we go. We're done. And now I can simply open this up in any sort of code editor. I'm going to use Visual Studio Code, which isn't the same as Visual Studio. Visual Studio Code is basically the same as Atom, or it's built on top of the GitHub's open source text editors. But this is a really just lightweight editor. And if I were to go in here, you can see it has all the details for me generated already. So I have like a basic getting started, a started JavaScript file. It pulled in some of what we call the TypeScript definitions for some of the libraries it references. And so that will give me a nice experience in here if you have an editor that supports things like hints and IntelliSense. It's already in here. But you can see that I have a script file that already references everything I need. It references Office.js. It references the Office UI fabric. I could remove that if I wanted to, but it's already referenced in here. It also generated that manifest file for me. So here's that manifest. And I could go and give this a description. We'll just call this a very, very cool add-in. And I'm ready to go. This app is basically done, and it's really simple to go out and deploy this. I simply need to go to my browser, and I want to go to my OneDrive. And if you have a Microsoft account, you have OneDrive. You just have to go to onedrive.com. And I'm going to generate a new Word document because we built this for Word. So I'm going to go and open up Word. The other thing I'm going to do is I need a web server to host this, and the great thing is with the Yeoman generator, we actually bring along a really simple web server with that. And so I'm going to go back to my terminal, and I'm going to say gulp serve static, and that's going to launch a web server that can host this for us. And you can see here it's actually hosted at HTTPS localhost 8443. So let me just grab this here really quickly just to open it up in a browser just to make sure that that web server is indeed running. There it goes. It looks like it's good. So I'm actually ready to debug this add-in. What I'm going to do is in Word, I'm going to go up to my Insert tab, and I have this little option for an Office add-in. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that. This is going to show me all the Office add-ins I use, and there's quite a few that I've used over the years, and so it's going to load a bunch of those. But there's this option for uploading my own. So under this Manage My Add-ins, I have an option to upload my own manifest file. And in this case, I'm going to be able to go out and locate that. So let's just go to, let's go to Projects. Office. There's my Salesforce webinar, and here is my manifest file. So I'm just going to grab that, open it, and say upload, and that's going to automatically load that now in my task pane. And it's actually fully connected here. In fact, if I were to just type my name and just highlight it, if I press my get data from selection, you can see my add-in was able to read data from the actual document that I'm in. I can go both directions. I can write data back to the document. But in this case, that's kind of end-to-end generating a blank project all the way to deploying and testing it inside of Office Online.
That's a really great example because the confusing part for most people, and I assume I'm like most people, is understanding this deployment mechanism where you've got an app running somewhere else, and really all that you need to do is make the Office application aware of the manifest, and the manifest really drives where the application comes from. But not only that, it's like, well, how do I interact with the data? And so that is scaffolded into almost all of the templates, I think, that are available for these kind of getting started add-ins.
That's right. It's kind of like a hello world that shows you how to do some of the basic working with the document. Absolutely. So with that, that's kind of talking a little bit about the basics of building an add-in. Dave why don't you walk us through a little bit about what it would mean to start connecting and talking with Salesforce in one of these add-ins?
Yeah, sure. So let me just go ahead and bring up my presentation. There's a few considerations. So one of the things that, it's really kind of, I think, intuitive to see how you might be able to get to the data in a document, for instance. I mean, that's scaffolded out for you. And then also, well, because I'm running on the web, I'm probably going to use some REST APIs to get the data from Salesforce. But we shouldn't stop there when we're thinking about creating add-ins, because in addition to the development effort of creating our databases and our workflow rules and our business processes, we're also generating user interface, especially with Lightning components. And so in thinking about these add-ins, you can actually build your add-in using Lightning components. And there's a few things to think about. One is authentication. So everything behind the Salesforce cloud needs to be authenticated, and this is going to be done using the web standard OAuth. We have JavaScript libraries that you can leverage to be able to just cut and paste and basically have the OAuth dance done for you. The OAuth means that you're going to need a connected app. That's no problem. I think anybody who's built anything external to Salesforce understands that. But the other thing that's going to be required is cores. And so this is a way for us to be able to whitelist wherever you're deploying this add-in so that the Salesforce cloud trusts it for cross-domain API calls. Richard mentioned some places about where you can host this. I'll just reiterate the Napa cloud, of course, Heroku, Azure, anywhere that a web server runs. You saw him running it from a local host. And so wherever the web server runs, what web server it is, really doesn't matter. I think the key thing to understand is that you do need to have SSL and HTTPS enabled for that web host. And of course, UI integration is going to be important as well. So here's a sample connected app. These are really easy to create inside of the force.com. In this case, I've got two callback URLs, one for a test version and one for the live version. And then here's an example of creating a course. So if you haven't built a course entry yet, it's super simple. All you do is click the new button and then add the URL for the domain that you want to be whitelisted. And then finally, in the case of the sample that I'm going to show you, I'm running on Heroku, and this is what my manifest looks like. And again, the key item here is the source location. In this case, it's my Heroku app called Real Estate-Interest. And then you also have some control over the iframe that Richard mentioned. Because we're in an iframe, you really don't have the dynamic sizing of the height of the iframe once it's already loaded. So we specify hopefully an optimum height here. And you can see that we've got different settings for the different devices, so tablet and phone settings as well. So those are the key features, and I know I just kind of glanced over those. I'm not going to necessarily go into the code, but what I would like to do is give you a demonstration of the things that you can do with an add-in. So to do that, I'm going to jump over to my browser, And here you see that we're in Salesforce, and we're in the Lightning experience. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to an app that we've built for a real estate company. And this particular app is composed of 4 different Lightning components. The first Lightning component is the header at the top, and then we've got a search box, a slider component that allows us to filter down our list, and then this list of properties indicating customers that have liked certain properties, so we know which ones are most popular. So those are 4 components, the house list, and then the other 2 above it. When I click into one of these, for instance, now, what I'm going to see is the detail page for that house, right? And what I want to point out is over on the right-hand side, we've got another Lightning component called Activities. And so this is a custom component just like the ones that we saw previously. And it's really great because I can click into that activity, and what's shown now on my contact page is that same house list component. The only difference is that now, because it's in a different context, the list is limited only to those houses that are liked by this contact. So that's really good. It shows me this one component that I've built. It's being used in 2 places, and it's aware of the context. But as we know, if we've got Outlook, we're probably working in our inbox a lot. So let's go ahead and take a look at the Outlook version of this. And this is on my real estate interest tab over here. And what you see now is that activity Lightning component running inside of Outlook. It's the exact same component that we saw on the contact detail page or on the property listing page, except now it's limited only to the activities for this contact. Likewise, I can see the houses that that same house list, again, limited to the context of this particular individual. So I'm going to click into another one just to show you how this works. So this has a little longer activity list, and then the house list in this case is got 4 houses in it. And you can see that because it's built with Lightning, meant to be responsive, we get a little bit of responsive UI out of it as well. So this is an example of taking some energy and effort that we've done in building an app inside of Salesforce, not necessarily Sales Cloud, not necessarily Service Cloud, but a custom application, and bringing that directly into the workflow of the individual within Outlook, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, Dave, this is I think a really great example of kind of being able to reuse some of that the web things that you've already spent time and put together. We found a lot of times that a lot of web developers might already have pages in one of their websites that could easily be maybe re-leveraged in one of these add-ins, and it's just a matter of, again, framing those the right way and then hooking those in to maybe something so that they are contextual. In your case, it's contextual around who that mail is from, looking that up, and then again, maybe doing a query against Salesforce to display that information. So super powerful scenario, and shows you, how you can easily, re-leverage this work that your developers have maybe have already done.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing, I mentioned the similarity between SLDS and Office. This particular component is styled using SLDS. It looks right at home inside of the Office UI. And you also saw that if I reset my login credentials and then relaunch this guy, I'm given the OAuth. Since I've got a cookie, it's already logged in, but it's asking me to allow the OAuth, and I can just leverage that as well. So very cool. Okay. So we're about near the end of the webinar. There's a few resources. We're going to fill out a few more items in this resource list and share this this deck with you. So you don't necessarily need to write down or screenshot these links unless you want to go grab it right now. And one of the things that I'm going to do is put up a tutorial for building that real estate app and creating the Outlook add-in. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the Q&A. We've got a couple of minutes here. Let's see. So the first question is, can users upload, download, sync a contact list? Why should or shouldn't they? In this case, I'm assuming that that you're in something like Excel and maybe you want to do some mass updates or sync the contacts from Outlook into Salesforce. There's no reason not to do that. I think that generally syncing, once you've got an add-in that allows you to kind of add new contacts as they come into your inbox, the need for syncing isn't that high. But there's other data. If you think about other types of data, as an admin of Salesforce, one of the most popular add-ins ever was something called the Excel connector. I think it stopped getting updated around version 10 of the API, and we're at version 35 today. But that was really great for admins to be able to mass update any kind of data. They would bring it into the Excel and then update it and send it back to Salesforce. So that's great.
It's actually similar to one of the resources links at the end, links to the workshop that we did at Dreamforce this last year, and that's actually kind of the similar scenario. You picked a data set, you got to pull it into Excel, make updates, and it would actually go and say, hey, here's what's changed between the last time you pulled the data from Salesforce and what's in your worksheet, and you could kind of push updates in either direction. So definitely take a look at that if that's what interests you. We certainly have APIs on both the Salesforce and Outlook side to work with contacts, but also lots of other data as well.
So another question really quickly. What if a user wants to leverage or update the contact information to be helpful, but when the individual doesn't own it? And I think this is a question about data access and sharing rules. Whatever sharing rules are you have inside of Salesforce will apply to any kind of add-in that you create for Office as well. So because it's going over the API and the logged in user is the individual, if they don't have access to a contact, then they won't be able to update that contact. So let's go with one more. We're really out of time here.
Let's do this. Let's do the...
Go ahead, Richard.
I was going to cover this one. There was one question about what are the impacts of Office 365 versus a non-cloud version of Office. It's a really good question. We get that frequently. When it comes to add-ins, it really, for the most part, it doesn't matter. As long as you're on, now for mail, you do need a certain Exchange server behind the scenes. It needs to be Exchange Server 2013 behind the scenes. And then you do need Office 2013, but as long as you're on 2013 or newer, anything, it works both on premises or the cloud version. It really doesn't matter. There might be some services that work a little bit differently, but for the most part, 2013 is the baseline to be at.
So we're over time. I promised everyone at the beginning that we would address all of these questions and then publish them at a later time. Give us about a week to come up with correct and definitive answers for all these, and then come check back at the landing page for the webinar. Richard, thank you so much for helping us with this webinar and bringing the magic of integrating with Office to the community.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks everyone for joining, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.